Hello, Dons fans. Ian here with another Don the Stat video. Well, I think most of us Essendon fans have been waiting for the season to come to its end for at least half the year, probably since that Richmond game and then following the Brad Scott loss. If we could have fast forwarded to the off-season, we sure would have taken that. But I thought it would be an interesting time now, 4 weeks out from the end of our season, to start really thinking about what that off-season could look like, and really looking into what sort of trades we could be looking at making, both in terms of players in and out, list management decisions we'll make with the players who are currently out of contract, and then what the drafting situation could look like based on the picks that we are likely to have. So I'm essentially putting on my Matt Rosa hat. And the thing I really want to take into account here is a very holistic approach. Okay, I think I've seen people talk about the trades we can make. I've seen, and I've certainly done it myself, talked about our list management decisions and then who we would like to see take in the draft. I haven't seen anyone do it from a whole lot of club perspective. And when you take into account what likely trades we are to do, how many list spots we'll have based on the players available or the players that are left on our list, and then what picks we're likely to have, to start considering what this could actually look like. And yes, I know these things could all, or everything I'm about to speak about now, could be irrelevant within a week with all sorts of different news and things that are coming out. So take this with a grain of salt. And if I'm completely wrong, you sure can come back into the comments and let me know about it. Before we get into this process, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. The first is that Essendon finishes the year in 17th position. This upcoming game for Richmond against West Coast obviously is going to have a big impact on whether we actually do finish in 17th position. If Richmond win that, then it's probably more likely than not we finish in 18th position. That game against Port Adelaide in the last round could be a real dead rubber for both sides. So that's a possible win for Essendon. But the other three games, the Bombers do look beyond us with the way in which we are playing. So a lot really comes down to what happens in this Richmond-West Coast game. Richmond have a good record against West Coast recently. They are playing in Melbourne, and they're probably due a win, especially with the pressure that's on Uze. So I don't think they're going to be trying to lose this game. So I do think they're a realistic chance of winning it. But I am going to work from where we currently are at the making of this video on the 27th of July, which is 17th position. I'm also going to assume that we are going to receive West Coast style assistance. I know that Cal to me the other day said that it was less likely we would get it if we finished in 17th position, but I don't think whether we finish in 17th or 18th, it really changes too much about where the list is at, and the fact that the AFL was considering, or it seemed to be likely, we're going to be receiving that West Coast style assistance of an end of first round pick and extra rookie spots. I'm going to work on that assumption again. Again, the AFL could come out tomorrow and say that Essendon is not going to be eligible for that assistance, and this video could be out of date. We're going to play around with that scenario until we hear otherwise. I also want to point out that we are dealing with trades and list management decisions based on known information, or at least from somewhat reputable sources. There's not going to be any, I'm trading a future second round pick for Nick Dacos style trades here. There are going to be things that we've heard about in the public and in the media that we've got a fair idea that could be happening. So let's start with the list situation before we get into those trades. Currently, Essendon has 36 players on its main list, 7 of whom are out of contract. The rookie list has 8 players. We're actually over-allotted 2 rookies due to long-term injury replacements. So Will Setterfield was on as a selection in place of Nick Martin, who missed the entire year. And then we were able to take Jackson Artemis in the mid-season draft due to the long-term injuries we'd suffered, Archer May and things along those lines, and Braden Figuerini, that meant we had an extra list spot, or we had a player that was out for the year that we could bring on Artemis there. We've also got 2 Cat B, which is outside that normal rookie area. 5 of our rookie list is out of contract, including Jaden Ewan, who's on that Cat B list. You're allowed to have 42 players between main list and rookie list, so we'll talk a little bit about what that means when we get to post the list management portion of this video. Currently, our draft hand stands as, and again, this is including the assistance pick, which I put there with the asterisk there of pick 19. We have pick 2, pick 19, pick 21, pick 57, and pick 75. It's unlikely that at the end of this video, we'll be needing picks 57 or 75, but it's just there so you know what we have access to. Let's get into the trading part of the situation. And obviously the first trade out is going to probably be Zach Merrett. A likely destination of Hawthorn does appear to be where he's going to get to. Obviously wanted to get there at the end of last year, and he's probably going to be heading there. It does seem to be interest from Geelong, which I think is important. Zach, as I said, he's probably looking to move to Hawthorn. I think a lot depends on how the Ben King situation plays out for the Hawks. If Gold Coast finish low enough and are happy with the compensation pick they get for Ben King leaving as a free agent, then it probably makes it really easy for them to do the Zach Merrett deal. If Gold Coast match any Hawthorn bid and force them to trade, then I think it gets up in the air. And that's when I think Geelong probably comes into the scenario a bit more. I think Zach's probably ready to move on. We're a year post him coming out, or it being revealed that he was meeting with Sam Mitchell. I think the level of discontent with Zach has lowered, and I think Essendon fans as a whole are probably more accepting of him leaving now. Not Queensland club there, mainly because I think there was some talk earlier on that he would look to go to Queensland, but I think that's died down now. So I think it is, a 90% chance that he's at Hawthorn next year, depending on what happens with Ben King. If the Ben King is forced to be a trade for the Hawks, then Geelong could come into it. But I think what ends up happening is what has been talked about in the media, where Zach is traded to Hawthorn for a 2026 first and second round pick. Currently, that's around pick 16 and 26. Again, I think there'll be a lot of commentary post the Zach Merrett trade with that sort of deal about how Essendon missed out on what they could have had last year with the picks. I think if you sort of look more closely into that scenario, one of those quote unquote first round picks was going to be in the 20s anyway, which sort of aligns with where that second round pick is now. And the other first round pick, we sort of end up getting in a roundabout way from Carlton, which ended up being Dyson Sharp. And so if we'd done that deal last year, we would have got Dyson Sharp anyway with that pick. And we would still have these picks in 2026 that we could make. So I think on a whole, if this is what Zach leaves for this year, essentially we won't have missed out on too much by not doing the trade last year. We would have, put a line in the sand about players wanting to leave and send a message to other clubs that if they do want to come for our players, they have to sort of engage early. I think the problem with Hawthorn wasn't necessarily their offer. It was the way in which they approached the trade and leaving it to the last minute thinking they could screw us over. I think teams have learned you probably can't do that anymore. So again, I think that's what is going to happen there. Before we continue, we're really grateful for all the support we've been getting at Don the Stat this year, particularly on YouTube. It's great to see that so many of you have subscribed and enjoying listening to the podcast or these videos on the feed. If you are watching this video and you're not yet subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button. It does really help get the channel out there and make sure that you don't miss out on any Don the Stat content. Moving on to our next trade, and again, it seems really likely that Jordan Ridley won't be at Essendon this year. The way he spoke after his scan the other day really confirms that he wants to be anywhere other than Essendon. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about both Queensland clubs a few weeks back, but the news that Gold Coast has really moved on from any interest really leaves Brisbane as his main club that he is looking to get to. It does seem to be some issues there with regards to salary cap. It seems to be a lot's going to be dependent on what happens with Zach Bailey, whether he does depart as a free agent. If that's the case, then there is a really good chance that Jordan will end up in Brisbane. If he doesn't depart, then that becomes a bit more of an issue for the Lions. And so it has been spoken about that he has been, or his management has been canvassing other Melbourne clubs. And I've started, there's no particular club's name yet, but you sort of think about the Melbourne clubs that really could use some key defensive help. Seems like the Western Bulldogs and North Melbourne both have issues with regards to their defenders and might want to take a chance on a Jordan Ridley as the sort of player who could help fix those issues for them. Even with his injury issues, clubs tend to think that they can get the best out of. They sort of look at things glass half full and think it'd be worth the punt there. I think what ends up happening, though, is that he does get to Brisbane. Again, it's not necessarily the case that a free agent is leaving it that late or this late and then sign on. I think Zach Bailey probably is on the way out. I'm going to lean that way. And Brisbane will take a compensation pick. The amount that Zach Bailey leaves for is going to generate a first-round compensation pick for Brisbane. I think we're able to turn Jordan Ridley into that compensation pick. Sort of spoke about in the podcast how, and it's been spoken about in the AFL media, the potential move towards pick buying. I think this is a way we could look at buying a pick. Jordan's contract has been mostly front ends, been mostly paid up front. You would imagine, given the state of our list and our salary cap, this is a sort of situation where we could pay, a vast majority of Jordan's salary and essentially buy that compensation pick from Brisbane. Even if Zach Bailey doesn't go, we could probably do the same with their natural first rounder, which at the moment is around pick 16. But you probably have Brisbane as a grand finalist the way they're playing and their history. You probably looking at something a little bit later there, but you could essentially buy that first round pick by paying most of Jordan's salary up there. The final player that's really been linked to being wanted to trade out of Essendon this year is Darcy Parish. Unlike Merrett and Ridley, there's really been no indication about what club will be interested in Darcy. There has been suggestions in the last year or two that he has tested the market and hasn't really found much interest anywhere. So I think if he was to leave, it's really up in the air where he goes. Look, this might be a bit fantasy. You look at a team like Richmond, he's really struggling at the moment and really struggling for support around their better players. You got Richmond, obviously Tim Taranto is a really good midfielder. You've got players like Dion Prestia, who is closer to the way out than the way in. There's no indication that he's going to retire at the end of this year, but he's someone who's really struggled with injury. And again, Darcy's probably in a similar boat, so why would Richmond want him? But if you look at his output this year, when he has been on the field, his output is better than Prestia's. His output is better than Jacob Hopper's. They potentially look at him as someone they could bring over to help support their younger players while those grow into being AFL players. Again, this is not set in stone. This is probably the most far out trade that I have in this video, but you've got to find somewhere there. So look, I think this is a real not much value in terms of Darcy, given his injury history, given the length of his contract. I think you use this as an opportunity to try and get future collateral so you can start working towards that 2027 draft. And when I get to the draft portion of this video, I'm going to be considering that given our NGA prospects that are coming through in 2027. So I would be using that pick 57 I spoke about earlier to trade with Darcy for Richmond's future second round pick. Have to remember again that picks next year with Tasmania coming in, them taking players out of the pool to begin with, and also getting, a large portion of picks early is going to start pushing back other clubs' picks. So the value of those picks aren't going to be as high as they would traditionally be in normal years. So again, yes, it's a second round pick, but the value is going to be lower. So that's what I've done. Again, this is probably the trade that I'm least sure about, but had to try and get Darcy somewhere there. Moving on to the players that we are likely to be trading in. The one player that's been really strongly connected with Essendon is Artie Jones from the Western Bulldogs. He obviously played quite well against us earlier in the year when the Bulldogs defeated us. I think he kicked at least 3 goals. And again, he's the one player that was constantly been coming back to as Essendon's been really interested in. It's been rumored we've offered him a 4 to 5 year deal, which suggests that we really quite rate him and are looking for players who play in his part of the ground, the forward half of the ground, dangerous players who can also defend. It's been a real letdown of us over the past couple of years. We are starting to see some players come through in this area, your Archie Wicks, your Isaac Kakos, and your Hussein Al-Ashkars. But with the way that AFL is being played in the modern day, you can't ever have too much of them. Given the amount of years that we're offering him, it's just we rate him quite highly. And the fact that if you think about what West Coast had to do with their assistance pick, they were really encouraged strongly to trade for players. They traded their end of first round pick for Brandon Starcevic. I think it's likely that if we did get that assistance package, it's what we would be looking to do. At this stage, there's no other real players that we're strongly connected to that it looks likely we'd be able to get. So it's the sort of thing where I would see that that end of first round pick being used to get an Artie there. And obviously that pick 19 is going to be shuffled around due to free agency and bid matching, but that's where I think it's likely to go. The other thing Essendon's really been strongly connected to is the quote-unquote Luke Hodge role, that they're getting the experienced player in to really help with club culture, to really help with the setup of the players on the ground, someone to really bridge that gap, as Luke Hodge did at Brisbane there. There's a huge amount of teams which are looking to move players on, or the players coming towards the end, there might be options. Lachie Neale is obviously the A1 option. We've definitely expressed our interest there. It does seem he's more likely to go to Collingwood, but if you could pay him $2 million a year for the next 2 years to almost act as an on-field coach and sort of use your salary cap to sort of circumvent the soft cap and essentially pay for an on-field coach, which I think we sort of did a little bit with Todd Goldstein last year, keeping him on essentially as a on-field ruck coach before him transitioning into an actual ruck coach. He'd be the most likely one, but it does seem like he's going to Collingwood. Speaking of the Pies, you're looking at players like Sidebottom, like Howe, like Pendlebury. Sidebottom does seem to be coming towards the end. Not sure how much value he would provide for the team. Pendlebury, even if Collingwood decided they didn't want to renew him, he seems like the type that would want to retire as a one-club player. So, I think that's unlikely. Jeremy Howe's the one that interests me the most. You think about what the role Luke Hodge was doing at Brisbane in those last couple of seasons that he played there. He was really marshalling the back line and setting them up. Howe would be a great option for us there, especially with Jordan Ridley going out. So of that list there, he'd be the one I'd most like to bring across. I guess the question is with his heritage, would he be preferring to hang out for Tasmania to come into the league and sort of be an inaugural Tasmanian player? So that would be my question mark about whether we would be a chance of getting him. You've got the Swans, you've got Jake Lloyd and Dane Rampy, who've played for a long time in a successful system. Look to bring them in. Think about some of the Geelong players on the outs, like Abuse or College Asney, again, players who've been around for a long time in a successful system that can help our younger players adapt to what needs to happen. As I said, if I had my pick, it would be Jeremy Howe, but it's really open. I haven't actually made a pick here because, as I said, it's so open at the moment. I think we will try and get some more experience, kind of like what we did with Braden Fiorini. It obviously hasn't worked out at this point due to his back injury, but looking for more of those types of players, particularly if experienced heads like Merrett and Ridley do leave, which they are likely to do. There are some other players who have been linked to Essendon somewhat. A lot of talk about Jarrod Witts being on the outs at the Suns and sort of being a cheap pickup, experience pickup for us. The game does seem to have passed him by with the new ruck rules, so I would be reluctant to bring in someone like Witts to fill a spot on the list where I don't think he's going to have a huge impact. Jack Bowers from Geelong, there's been talk that he is not likely to, or he's down the list of at Geelong in terms of getting a new contract. I know we showed interest in him when he was on the market from the Suns. How much of that was about the pick he was packaged with is an open question. But again, he's performed fairly well in a Geelong side that he hasn't always been able to make his own spot. In a side like Essendon, he'd probably almost be a certain starter. There was some talk we were interested in Lachie McNeil, who would be able to get as a free agent. Is this an unlisted free agent or unrestricted free agent? Sorry. And then there's a bit of talk about Sam Marshall wanting to leave. Brisbane Premiership player, young midfielder. Again, I think he would be ideal if he was interested in coming to Essendon, but there's been nothing that's been connecting him to us at this stage. So, yeah, as much as I would like to have put him as a possible trade in, I haven't done it at this stage until we start to see something that suggests that he would actually want to come to Essendon. There's more than just an expression of interest. There's actually been some sort of offer put to him. So if we heard something like that, then that would update this. What that does is take us to the list management stage. And because of the lack of players that I've brought in and the fact that we've lost so many players due to players training out, I have kept probably a few more people on the main list than others would do. So at the moment, I've got all of Jerrine, Unwin, Cox and Perkins getting deals, all just 1-year deals, just sort of wait and see. Obviously, Jerrine and Unwin are both newly drafted, that they're coming to the end of their initial deals, yet to receive a contract. Both have had injury issues this year. They're playing in the VFL. Both have shown, signs of talent. Cox and Perkins, again, I think if you look at that order that I've put them in there, that's the order I think they're most likely to get a contract. Up until some news recently, I actually had Perkins had been in my delist column. As hard as it is for me to say that as a Perkins fan, but again, it does seem like the game is passing him by a little bit. But I don't see the harm, given what's happening with the list, and it looks like we're getting younger and less experienced, to keep around some AFL-ready bodies as sort of break glass in case of emergency and to support the VFL. I think we've seen in the past when we have just kids in the VFL, how difficult it is to develop those kids without support around them. So I'd be keeping them on the list almost as, again, break glass in case of emergencies. And obviously they both have talent, so they could, under a new regime, potentially, reignite their AFL careers. Into the list, I think the three list ones there are pretty obvious. Gresham and Guelphy essentially haven't been cited on the main or in the main side for the past couple of months, even though they've both been performing relatively well at VFL level. And obviously there seems to be a line put through Elijah Sardis, even under the Dean Solomon regime. He got a couple of weeks and then it's been out, and despite dominating the VFL, hasn't been able to make his way back into the side. So yeah, unless the new coach is really big on what Elijah can bring, it's probably likely he's also on his way out. As for the rookie list, I have new contracts for Sardo Hooley and Jaden Ewan. Now, Jaden Ewan is Cat B, so he does have a different situation to the other rookies. What's interesting to note that we are interested in some of the American prospects that have or are coming out. We're one of the few clubs that are looking at some of those. I think that's one of the reasons that Jaden hasn't quite got a contract yet. If we like one of those American prospects as a longer-term prospect than Jaden, there's a potential that he does, unfortunately, move to the delist column, or you could look at relisting him as a regular rookie, so not on the Cat B rookie list, and then potentially Sardo Hooley would miss out. I have Edwards, McMahon, and Setterfield all on the delist option or the list. McMahon obviously hasn't got a look in as from the VFL. Tom Edwards seems to have again fallen out of favour despite some good early performances. Again, another one has had a couple of injury setbacks that's meant he hasn't really been able to push for senior football. And Will Setterfield was only back on the list because of Nick Martin's injury. Hopefully we're getting Nick Martin back next year. I do think, though, that if we do get those extra rookie spots, some of those players might survive if we get those extra spots on the rookie list. And in fact, I'm probably more interested in those extra rookie spots than I am in the potential draft pick there. So we'll talk about that right at the end of the video. So after those trades and list decisions, this is where we find ourselves in Essendon's list heading into the draft. So I've got 32 players on our main list contracted, and at least 4 to 5 spots available in the draft. And then on the rookie list, I've got 5 on the main list and 2 on the Cat B list. And this is before the extra picks, which I'm going to talk about as an extra thing at the end. So again, you can have 42 players total. So that means we have 5 spots available. So you could go 4 new main list players and 1 new rookie, or you go 5 new main list players and 0 rookies. As you're going to see as I go through the draft, I'm going for 5 main list players. So at the end of this process, we'll have 37 players on the main list and 5 on the rookie list before the extra selections there. So after all that trading, we're going to end up with the following picks available to us. Pick 2, pick 16, pick 17, pick 21, pick 22, and then pick 27. Now, all of these are subject to being moved around. Obviously, pick 2 is going to end up being at least pick 3 or pick 4 with the bids that you're forced to do. And I've accounted for that by already putting in pick 22, which is our first pick after our natural second rounder, which is 21. I have shuffled everything around based on what Essendon is going to do and going to get, but all those pick numbers are up in the air again due to the bid matching and due to free agency compensation. So we don't know what it's actually going to look like, but I think in terms of relatively where they are in the draft order, that's what it's going to end up being. So again, take the numbers with a grain of salt. We are going to be picking players that are around those areas there. Before I get into those picks, I want to acknowledge that the sources I've used to help me determine who I'm taking with each of these picks. Obviously, Cal Toomey at AFL.com, Jasper Chaliper at ESPN, Tommy Wolf at Reading the Play, and then Don the Stat favourite Rick Edwards. His Patreon is Bomber Rico. Make sure you check it out. All have put out their current rankings recently. I have devoured all of them, and I've used across all of those rankings to make my decisions about who I will draft with the picks that we have here. Let's get stuck into it with the first pick that Essendon will have as pick 2. And there's really 4 players emerging as sort of in the market or around the mark for those picks. Obviously, Harry Van Hatten's been spoken about a lot as the number 1 open pool player, but unlike, say, a Harley Reid, it's not set in stone that he's going to be that number one player. He hasn't quite set himself that far apart. You have Archie Butler, who a lot of Essendon fans are really excited about, given his connection to or fandom of Essendon, his open fandom of Essendon. You also have Gus Teixeira, who's really coming strong, and from reading Cal Toomey's report, he's really high on Gus as one of the best open pool players. And then Ethan Drever from, again, another Victorian player, probably the best pure midfielder out of those four. Teixeira and Butler are the sort of, hybrid midfield forwards. So Archie's probably more of a forward, and Gus is probably a little bit more of a midfielder out of the two. So there's a lot of options there, and it's still really open as to who was going to be available at our pick. I know the general thinking is that Richmond is going to be taking Van Hatten, given their need for a ruck. But again, there's a history of not taking rucks early, so they could bypass that and look for another option. But taking all that into account, I do think Richmond end up picking Van Hatten, which leaves us with Butler, Teixeira, and Drever. And for me at this stage, I am taking Archie Butler. Unfortunately for him, he has had that shoulder injury a couple of games into the champs, so he's probably not going to be able to show as much of his wares over the back end of the season as player like Drever or Teixeira. But I still have him as that player. Talk of him being a real competitor, his ability near the goals, again, as a team that's really struggled to score, and a team that's really struggled for players that have innate goal sense. You look at even someone like Isaac Kako, who I really rate. His first option seems to be to pass the ball and bring others into it, as opposed to taking a shot. I think we really need those players who can take a shot on goal. Probably haven't quite seen enough of him as a midfielder, but you look at his traits in terms of his competitiveness, and he's willing to win contests. You can see him translating into a sort of an impact player in the middle. The connection's been made to a Toby Green. I think we'd be pretty, at any stage in the last 15 years, we would have been pretty happy to have a Toby Green on our list. So yeah, that's why I'm with him. But again, this is really open. And if you ask me again in a couple of weeks, I might have a different answer for you. Moving on to our next pick, pick 16. This is a player who I know that a lot of Essendon content creators are really impressed with. He's again, as a key defender, he's not the highest rated key defender in this pool based on all the rankings. But again, people with better judgment than I on these things really rave about what he can do, both as a lockdown defender and as an interceptor. Again, with Jordan Ridley going out, with question marks over Ben Mackay's long-term future, with Lewis Hayes' injury history, I think we should be looking for another defender to bring in. I think he's the one that fits best there. Another issue for Essendon for the longest time has been outside class. It's a ball use and pace, both in terms of ability to really be creative aggressively as well as pace across the ground. That's why I like Toby Krasner at our pick 17. Again, someone who can really move the ball or provide a lot of impetus on the outside. And I think with bringing in players like Dyson Sharp and Sullivan Roby, we've seen what impact they can have on the inside of the contest. We've also still got Sam Durham and Jai Caldwell on the list, whose main function is a lot of inside work. So I do think we need to reinforce that outside class. We obviously brought in Jacob Farrow, but I think we could use a bit more of that. And that's why I've got Toby Krasner there. Now, pick 21, this is where I start to look for the future. Again, as I spoke about earlier, Tasmania coming in is going to warp next year's draft, and it's going to make picks in next year's draft worth less from a player perspective, so a player value perspective. And so I think much like in the 2024 draft, which was considered deep, and this draft, there's a lot of talk that the first 25 are, of a really good standard. And much like that 2024 draft was spoken about, there are going to be teams that are going to be looking to move into the first round or high up of this this draft. And I think around pick 21 is where we can look to get some value for next year to match those academy players and father-sons we've got. So your Kobe Buicks, your Mustafa Darwishes, and your Tavita Rodens. I think this is where we can look to get value. Obviously, if we get a really good offer from a couple of those earlier picks in the teens, we might take that option. But I think those picks in the teens that we're likely to have, we're really going to want to lock in on the players that we really value. When you're in the teens, the player ratings or the team's rankings of players can be wildly different. So I think we're going to want to lock in those players that we really rate, and then use a pick like this to try and get into another pick in the first round next year to help with Buick matching and Darwish matching, and the like. So I would be looking to trade this pick at that stage. Again, there's going to be a team that is going to want to trade a first round to get a player in this. I can feel very strongly that that's going to happen, and that's going to help us in the long run. Again, it doesn't have to happen at this pick, but this is around the area that I can foresee it happening. Moving on there to pick 22, I'm still looking for more players that can impact forward of the ball, and Cody Templeton, from reading all the draft rankings, was the player around this pick that most interested me. Again, I think we really need to strengthen forward of the ball. And I think, Templeton of all the players in the rankings that I've read is the one that stands out to me around this area. So I'll be looking to taking him there. And that leaves us with our final pick of the draft. And this might either be a direct pick or by bid matching. I'll be looking to take Blake Justice. Obviously, injury has hurt him a bit this year in terms of his visibility. I know that he was around the top 20 in most people's rankings at the end of last year, heading into this year, but the injury has really set him back a little bit. I know Rick is really big on him. He had him in his top 20. And Rick's probably seen more of Blake Justice than most of the draft watchers, given his focus on Calder and even at Essendon training. But the rest of the rankings that I've been referring to don't have him in the top 25. But he did come back for Calder last week and had a really good game. So he could really start pushing up the draft rankings. But I think, we'll probably only need something like this to match a bid for Blake Justice. And if he's not bid by then, I think we just take him with this pick. He's obviously got a bit of development to go, as you can see from his picture. He's the sort of player that could really move into the midfield or have an impact up forward, and really excited about what he could bring. So he would be a player that I'd be looking to bring in there. So after the trade and draft period, this is what the list changes would look like for me. So ins would be Artie Jones, quote unquote Luke Hodge type, Archie Butler, Tyson Bradley, Toby Krasner, Cody Templeton, and Blake Justice. And then outs will be Zach Merrett, Jordan Ridley, Darcy Parish, Elijah Sardis, Jade Gresham, Matt Guelphy, Tom Edwards, Will Setterfield, and Liam McMahon. But just hold on, because we do have those extra picks that we could be getting from the AFL in terms of the rookie spots. Obviously, you have to wait and see what happens with other teams and their delistings about players you might be interested in bringing in. So I've really just focused on the Essendon VFL program as potential source of players for these extra rookie spots. I think Will Setterfield is one that could survive because of these extra rookie spots. Obviously, he's really rated highly as a person around the club. He's done a really good job in the VFL, sort of shepherding through some of the younger players. He's clearly a really team-first person that people enjoy playing with. I think you look at what West Coast did with their extra rookie spots and bringing sort of in those, lower-end players that could really bolster the list and support the development there. And I think a player like Will Setterfield could do that, and obviously can still play a role at AFL level. And then looking at some of the players on the VFL list that could be interesting, Boston Dowling as a ruckman. I did consider looking at some of the ruckmen around the area of our late picks for drafting. I know Ethan Herbert from South Australia is probably the second best ruck in the draft after Harry Van Hatten was around that area, and I did consider him as an option. But I thought with Boston Dowling and seeing what he's been doing at the AFL level, he's obviously got a bit of development to go. But you get him onto an AFL list, into an AFL lifestyle, an AFL program, he certainly has a lot of talent there that it could be really expanded on. And obviously bigger men, come along a bit later as prospects. So he's someone I really like to get a look at. If we're looking for guaranteed key defensive depth that could support, Tyler Sellers has obviously done a really good job in the VFL for a couple of years now. He'd be a real dependable option, almost like a Liam McMahon at the other end, someone who could, as a break glass in case of emergency in the AFL as a key defender. So I would consider him. And then someone who's only just recently come onto the VFL list, Deacon Kalpakis. We actually got him over from Coburg. He's been really impressive in the games that he's played at Essendon VFL, with his ability to intercept and obviously losing Jordan Ridley, and that was his one wood, the ability to intercept. Deacon could be a real rough gem that we could find in our VFL program that could potentially help replace that. So again, he's someone I would look at there. And then finally, I spoke about delistings, but we could possibly do the funniest thing ever. Henry Hustwaite's probably on his way out at Hawthorn. I don't know anything about whether he's getting a contract, but I think it'd be very funny if they did list him after all the noise they made about him last year as part of a merit trade, and then we could troll them by picking him up as one of these extended rookies. But that's just a little bit of fun for my part as a bit of a dream there. Well, look, that is the end of the video. Thanks to all of those who made it to the end here. Please let me know in the comments about what you liked about this process and what you think I've gotten completely wrong. All opinions are welcome. Again, you can support Thunderstat by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can support us on Patreon, and the podcast is available on Apple and Spotify. Doing more videos across the rest of the season as we come to the end. Probably do another list management video, one focused specifically on the players left without contracts and talking about what their futures could be. But until next time, stay safe and go Dons.